You know you need to shower. You can feel it. The greasiness in your hair, the slightly uncomfortable feeling on your skin, the awareness that it's been longer than socially acceptable since your last shower. You know other people shower daily, sometimes twice a day, and think nothing of it. But for you, the thought of getting in the shower feels overwhelming, heavy, like a task so monumental that you'd rather do almost anything else. You'll scroll through your phone for an hour, clean your entire room, organize a drawer, anything to avoid the shower. And when you finally force yourself to do it, when the social pressure or the physical discomfort becomes too much to ignore, it's not the refreshing, rejuvenating experience other people describe. It's an ordeal, something to get through as quickly as possible, something that drains rather than energizes you. People don't understand. Just take a shower, it's not that hard. You'll feel better once you do it. It only takes 10 minutes. They say it like you haven't thought of these things, like you're just being lazy or gross or difficult. But it's not laziness. It's something deeper, something you can't quite explain even to yourself. The shower feels like sensory assault. The water pressure, the temperature changes, the sounds echoing in the small space, the feeling of being enclosed. Or maybe it's the executive function required. All the steps, the transitions, the effort of starting and completing a task when your brain feels stuck. Or maybe it's depression, the kind that makes every basic self-care task feel impossible, where brushing your teeth feels like climbing a mountain and showering feels like running a marathon. Whatever the reason, you're tired of feeling broken, tired of the shame, tired of forcing yourself through something that everyone else seems to do effortlessly while you're battling invisible resistance every single time. Tonight, I'm going to show you the psychology behind shower aversion, the real reason some people struggle with basic hygiene, and why it's not about being lazy or gross. It's about brain chemistry, sensory processing, and mental health conditions that make routine tasks genuinely difficult. Before we dive deep into applied psychology, subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you're from. David Chen was 28 years old when he finally admitted to his therapist that he sometimes went 5 or 6 days without showering. Not because he didn't know he should, not because he didn't care about hygiene, but because the act of showering felt so overwhelmingly difficult that he couldn't make himself do it. His therapist didn't react with disgust or judgment. Instead, she asked, "Can you describe what makes it difficult? What specifically feels overwhelming about it?" David had never been asked to articulate this before. He'd only been told he needed to shower more, needed to take better care of himself, needed to stop being lazy. No one had ever asked why it was hard. "It's everything," he said finally. "The process of stopping what I'm doing, getting undressed, the transition from dry to wet, the water hitting my skin. It feels too intense even when I adjust the temperature, the sound echoing in the bathroom. Having to wash my hair, my body, all these separate steps that require effort and attention, and then getting out, being cold, having to dry off, get dressed again. It's exhausting just thinking about it." What David was describing wasn't laziness. It was a combination of sensory processing sensitivity, executive dysfunction, and depression. 3 separate but interconnected issues that can make routine self-care genuinely difficult. Dr. Elaine Aron's research on sensory processing sensitivity shows that approximately 20% of people have nervous systems that process sensory information more intensely than average. For these individuals, the shower isn't just water and soap, it's overwhelming sensory input. The sound of water echoing in an enclosed space, the feeling of water droplets hitting skin with varying pressure and temperature, the smell of soap and shampoo intensified by steam, the temperature fluctuations as you move in and out of the water stream, the visual stimulation of steam and reflections, the tactile sensation of wet hair, wet skin, the transition from dry to dry again. For someone with high sensory sensitivity, this isn't refreshing. It's overstimulating. The shower becomes a sensory assault that the nervous system has to recover from, rather than an energizing experience. David realized this was part of his issue. He'd always been sensitive to textures, sounds, bright lights, preferred quiet environments, soft fabrics, minimal stimulation. The shower was the opposite. Maximum stimulation in a confined space. His nervous system reacted to it as stress, not relaxation. But there was another component: executive dysfunction. "Doctor, Russell Barkley's research on executive function shows that some people struggle with task initiation, transitioning between activities, and completing multi-step processes, not because they're lazy, but because their brain's executive control system works differently. Showering requires significant executive function. You have to stop your current activity, initiate the shower routine, complete multiple sequential steps: undress, adjust water, wash hair, wash body, rinse, turn off water, dry off dress, and transition back to your previous state. Each step requires mental energy and decision-making. For people with ADHD, depression, autism, or other conditions affecting executive function, this sequence can feel genuinely overwhelming. It's not that they don't want to shower, it's that their brain struggles to initiate and complete the multi-step process. David had undiagnosed ADHD. Task initiation was difficult for him across all areas of life, but showering was particularly challenging because it required stopping whatever hyper-focus activity he was engaged in, transitioning to a completely different context, and completing a routine with multiple steps. His brain would tell him, "I should shower," but couldn't generate the activation energy needed to actually start the process. He'd procrastinate for hours, sometimes days, not out of defiance, but because his executive function system couldn't bridge the gap between knowing he should do something and actually doing it. Then there was the depression component. Dr. Aaron Beck's cognitive model of depression identifies that depression affects motivation, energy, and the perceived effort required for basic tasks. When you're depressed, everything feels harder. Tasks that should be simple, brushing teeth, making food, showering, feel monumental. David's depression made the already difficult shower routine feel impossible. His energy was depleted. His motivation was non-existent. The shower represented not just physical effort, but emotional effort, caring enough about himself to maintain hygiene, which required a level of self-worth that depression had stolen. On his worst days, David didn't shower because he genuinely didn't feel worth the effort. Why bother taking care of a body and a life that felt meaningless? The shower became a symbol of self-care that he didn't believe he deserved. Dr. Catherine Gordon's research on depression and self-care found that hygiene neglect is a common symptom of depressive episodes, and it creates a shame spiral. You don't shower because you're depressed, then you feel ashamed about not showering, which deepens the depression, which makes showering even harder. David experienced this cycle intensely. He'd go days without showering, feel disgusted with himself, which made him more depressed, which made the shower feel even more impossible. The shame became another barrier. He felt too gross to shower, like he didn't deserve to be clean until he magically became less depressed, which couldn't happen without self-care, which he couldn't do because of the depression. There's also research on what psychologists call washing compulsion versus washing aversion existing on a spectrum. Dr. Paul Salkovsky's work on OCD shows that some people obsessively shower multiple times daily, while others develop aversion to washing as a response to past trauma, sensory issues, or mental health conditions. For some people, shower aversion connects to childhood experiences, being forced to bathe when they didn't want to, having their boundaries violated during bath time, experiencing shame or punishment related to hygiene. The shower becomes associated with negative emotions that persist into adulthood. David didn't have trauma history, but he recognized that every negative comment he'd received about his hygiene, from parents, partners, roommates, had layered additional shame onto the already difficult task, making it psychologically harder each time. His breakthrough came when his therapist reframed showering not as a moral issue, but as an accommodation need. You're not lazy or gross. You have sensory processing differences, executive function challenges, and depression. You need strategies that work with your brain, not against it. They developed accommodations, reducing sensory input by using a gentler shower head, playing music to mask the echoing water sounds, using unscented soap to reduce olfactory stimulation, breaking the routine into smaller steps that felt manageable, using body wipes on days when a full shower felt impossible, removing the all-or-nothing thinking. Most importantly, addressing the depression through therapy and medication improved David's baseline functioning enough that self-care tasks became less overwhelming. 6 months later, David's relationship with showering had transformed. Not because he suddenly loved showers, he still found them somewhat overwhelming. but because he'd removed the shame, implemented sensory accommodations, and addressed the underlying depression and ADHD that made the task difficult. He showered more regularly, but also gave himself permission to use alternatives when needed. Body wipes, dry shampoo, washing at the sink, these weren't failures. They were practical solutions for days when a full shower wasn't accessible to his nervous system. I spent years thinking something was fundamentally wrong with me, David told me. That I was just gross and lazy. But I wasn't gross or lazy. I had sensory processing differences, executive function challenges, and depression, all making a routine task genuinely difficult. Once I understood that, once I stopped judging myself and started accommodating my actual needs, everything changed. The psychology of shower aversion is complex. It can stem from sensory processing sensitivity, executive dysfunction, depression, anxiety, autism, ADHD, past trauma, or combinations of these factors. It's rarely about not caring or being lazy. For neurotypical people without sensory issues or mental health challenges, showering is effortless. Their nervous system isn't overwhelmed by the sensory input. Their executive function easily handles the multi-step process. Their mental health doesn't drain their energy for basic self-care. But for others, it's genuinely difficult. The shower creates sensory overload. The routine requires executive function they don't have available. The depression makes everything feel impossible. If you struggle with showering, you're not alone. You're not broken. You likely have underlying factors, sensory differences, executive function challenges, mental health conditions that make this routine task harder for you than it is for others. The solution isn't forcing yourself or feeling ashamed. It's understanding what makes it difficult for you specifically and finding accommodations that work with your brain. Maybe that's sensory modifications, gentler water pressure, different soaps, music to reduce echo. Maybe it's breaking it into smaller steps. Maybe it's treating the underlying depression or ADHD. Maybe it's giving yourself permission to use alternatives on difficult days. Your worth isn't determined by how often you shower. Your brain works differently, and that's okay. You deserve strategies that actually help rather than judgment that makes it harder. And that's the end of our experience. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. It's very important for us to know the truth. Be honest in the comments, leaving creative suggestions so we can improve the quality of our content more and more. Comment where you're from. Check out the video on the screen. I'm sure you'll like it. See you in a few seconds. We are Applied Psychology, and this is our contribution. Subscribe.